Whether or not you're new to the parallel TCG or not, there's certain things that every player needs to know in order to climb those ranks. In this video, I'm going to go over 5 tips based off of my experience during Parallel's alpha version, as well as my former competitive TCG experience. So let's get right into it. First off is understanding the concepts of tempo and value. What I mean by tempo is the rhythm or momentum of the match and whose side it's favoring at any given time. Essentially, if you're playing for tempo, you're looking to actively make moves that your opponent feels that they have to answer to. Creating a tempo advantage can be paramount to being able to further snowball as the rounds progress. Now, what I mean by value is squeezing as much advantage as you can out of a card you play. So let's look at an example to illustrate this. Let's say we're starting the game and I'm going first. I look at my hand and I note that I have a 1-cost Mercenary Gunslinger, whose effect is a muster that deals 1 damage to any target. After the obvious banking of a card, I have 2 options. Either I can play for tempo here or play for value. If I wanted to play for value, I would hold on to my Gunslinger and not play anything this turn, because I want to get that maximum output from my Gunslinger, specifically by trying to kill whatever unit my opponent plays during his coming turn, with that muster effect. Now, my opponent banks and plays a 1/1 unit, a pretty standard turn 1 move. Now that it's my turn, I look at my Gunslinger and feel good knowing that once I play it this turn, I can instantly kill his 1/1 unit and I still have my 1/1 Gunslinger on the field for future turns. So I play it and get the full value that I can out of it, and I'm left with 1 energy this turn. While this might seem like a good move at first glance, there was a huge missed opportunity for us by prioritizing value. To illustrate that, let's see how playing for tempo instead changes the end result. If I wanted to play for tempo, I would ignore trying to get the maximum value of the Gunslinger's muster damage and simply play him this turn as a basic 1/1 unit. Of course, I still get the muster damage, but it doesn't really do much as it hits my opponent directly. Now, my opponent goes, banks a card, and plays his 1/1 Reliant Gamma. Now it's my turn again, so I bank a card and see that I can trade his Gamma with my Gunslinger, so I do so. Now, the field doesn't look as good as first glance, as I no longer have that 1/1 unit that I had like the last time. However, the key difference is that now I still have 2 energy to work with this turn, and I see that I have a 2-cost unit that I can play, so of course I do so. Now we can see, compared to before, our current board is much better now that we have that unit on the board that's stronger than our old 1/1 Mercenary Gunslinger, and we're able to make full use of our energy resources this turn. I do want to note that this play seems quite obvious, I'm sure, but there are times that you'll be faced with a split decision like this which aren't as clear, so you'll really have to take the time to fully understand how best your deck functions in order to know when you're making the right decision. My next tip is a fairly basic one, and that's to recognize that your health is a resource. Just like your energy or the cards in your hand, your health is something you can utilize. What I mean by that is to not be afraid of losing health, especially during that early game. Don't feel like you necessarily have to play certain cards at inopportune times in order to feel safe. Sometimes the right move is to hold on to a card and take the hit to your health this turn. Once again, to caveat, you still need to be aware of your opponent's tempo and make sure that they don't snowball too hard. But again, this is something that you recognize given enough experience. All I'm trying to emphasize is that wasting cards or resources in order to solely save a few health points is often not the right move. Now, we get to something that many people will find hard to accept, but it's simply a reality of the game, and that is to not get too married to any faction. With Parallel being a TCG, there are metas that come and go, and each faction will have their time in the spotlight, as well as their time in the dumpster. And that's something you have no control over. So, if you want to stay competitive in the game, you should be prepared to switch your allegiances and make no promises to any faction. This rolls onto the next tip, which is recognizing that you're going to have to spend some time and effort to fully understand all the cards, at least for now while there's not that many, and all the paragons in the ever-changing meta. If you're new to TCGs, you might be used to ignoring what others are doing and play whatever game you're playing however you see fit and be pretty successful overall. But that's sadly not the case the majority of the time in TCGs. Over time, through playing the game and watching others, you'll get a better idea of what to expect. For example, if your opponent is playing a specific paragon, if you're aware of what deck archetypes use that paragon, you can better plan your moves because you know exactly what to expect. This might seem like quite an obvious thing to mention, but what I'm trying to emphasize is that taking the time to truly study the cards and combos you face can make a massive difference in how you perform against them. And if you want to be competitive, this knowledge is crucial. Even in other TCGs, often pro players not just know their own deck inside and out, they know all the other decks that they're probably going to face during a tournament, inside and out. They'll know how to counter every single move their opponents might play. Especially once a meta forms, you absolutely have to know what is meta and how to play with it, or else you almost certainly will be losing a majority of the time. Or, of course, at the end of the day, you could also just play the meta archetype and, not worry as much. But of course, like I said, it still helps to know everything that everyone's playing. With the game still being new, there isn't much of a meta yet, so there's still plenty of time to get experience with the cards and the paragons, so make use of that. Now we move on to the final tip. It's quite simple and straightforward, and that is to use your Paragon active. I cannot stress the number of times I've played a match and my opponent just never uses their Paragon active, even though we're at the late game. Each of us have 9 or 10 energy already at this point, and my opponent has just not played their Paragon active. I'm serious. I cannot emphasize how important utilizing your Paragon is in the game of Parallel, especially when some Paragons specifically have weaker passives in order to make way for having a super strong active. And if you don't use that active, you're basically just making your life way harder. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe for more Parallel TCG content.